How did we make it here? We got through the first era of duel monsters with magical magicians and white dragons to the second era with a new generation of destiny-defying heroes. And now we're in the 5Ds era, which ushered in a new third anime that takes place in the future of duel monsters, where definitely not Akira plays card games on motorcycles? Yeah, I was on the train or motorcycle of thinking this was an absolutely absurd idea when it was first announced, when I first saw it in an issue of Monthly Shonen Jump magazine. Dual blimps and dual academies? I was fine with that, but oh no, motorcycles are just too much. In retrospect, many people thoroughly enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and while I have not watched it myself as of this video's production, my job here is to look at the card game, not the show. A new era is a new era, and that's a big deal when it comes to me making these lengthy history series. So let's find out if this rebranding is a shiny new vehicle of play or if it stalls on startup. Let's rev it up! We ended on the domination of Gladiator Beasts in Gladiator format that ended on July 2008. Sort of. This section I wasn't sure where to place. The end of my Gladiator video, its own video, or here. Obviously, I'm talking about it here, but I say that because the World Championship in August was after the release of Synchro Monsters, but before the legality of them and the list that would define the upcoming format. What made me ultimately decide to place the WC here was simply a timeline reason, as it'll give us a fresh contrast between the end of the last format and the following one. Let's discuss the 2008 World Championship. August 10th would be the last call for GX Duelist, even though the logo was now the 5Ds logo. Top decks had more of a variety than one would expect from the format and not seen at the Shonen Jump Championships. Gladiator Beasts, of course, but also Dad Control, Lightsworn, Honest Viper, Gravekeeper Burn, and Anti-Meta Beatdown. Remember, Glad could do it all. A constant engine, control, and aggro play too. DD Crow would be the breakout tech to counter any graveyard heavy decks. Even still, Gravekeepers could lock the graveyard, Anti-Meta was a surprisingly aggressive deck, and Honest Viper used a solid light engine with the versatile card Victory Viper XX03 for attack gain, back row destruction, and token generation. But it was Mutsuoka Kazuki from Japan with Glad that unsurprisingly grabbed first, from a final round against another Glad deck. It did not completely dominate, as third place went to quite the rogue deck, Lightsworn. It was a rather surprising scene. On August 5th was the starter deck for the 5Ds era, aptly titled Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. This deck introduced Synchro Monsters and Tuners. Okay, so, Synchro Monsters. These are like fusion monsters, except they have white coloring and go into the what was fusion deck, now called the extra deck. Instead of using polymerization on two specific monsters, Synchros typically require a tuner, which is a new monster ability, and a non-tuner monster. You add up the levels of the two monsters and then send them from the field to the grave to perform a synchro summon of the monster equaling the added level. It's in the same vein as rituals in that regard. Now, monster levels were more important than ever as decks began to revolve around synchro summoning. This was also the start of Master Rule 1, which, in addition to the change of the fusion deck to the extra deck, changed some other terminology, plus introduced limitations to the deck size otherwise. This includes main deck between 40 and 60 cards, extra deck 0 or 15 cards, and the side deck also 0 or 15 cards. So no arriving to events with a cartoon sandwich sized deck, nor adding 3 copies of every MRD fusion monster in your extra deck. While the term Master Rule is a formal name, this applies to the OCG, whereas the TCG simply implied the rule change. The previous title was the New Expert Rules, so Konami likes the sound of a duelist becoming more experienced as the years go on. Then, in a weird turn of events, August 18th would mark the Collectible Tins 2008 Wave 1, which debuted the first core set before its regular release. The set being the Duelist Genesis, which we'll cover in a moment, would accompany the tins with two powerful synchros, Stardust Dragon and Red Dragon Archfiend. Stardust would be the prominent monster here, as its effect allows you to tribute it for a negation of a destruction effect. Then you could special summon Stardust back during the end phase. Smashing Ground, Dark Arm Dragon, or Mirror Force? Don't worry about it with this synchro monster. And after that whole odd release schedule, we finally have the September ban list, and the 5Ds era for metaplay officially began. The September 2008 ban list was no small one, as plenty of cards got thrown around. After all, Dark Magician of Chaos, Destiny Hero Disc Commander, and Premature Burial were now forbidden. Then Reasoning and Monster Gate got limited, which killed off the Reasoning Gate deck. DAD, Judgment Dragon, and Card of Safe Return got semi-limited, which was a hit to popular decks of Gladiator format. Oddly enough, Chain Strike got semi too. And then Unlimited, we got Malicious, Lad, Allure, and Rhoda. Oh, and Dandelion and Gores got limited too, despite their TCG release still being a ways away. Interestingly enough, the clear top deck of last format, Gladiator Beast, was untouched completely. Perhaps this was because Upper Deck realized that synchros would be the most prevalent mechanic over Glad's contact fusion strategy. This makes sense given that Stardust alone could counter many Glad effects. The Duelist Genesis would officially be released on September 2nd. It's the first core booster to have synchros and tuners, and introduces the Psychic type. And of course, Kunai with Chain! The core set freshman lineup of synchros is Stardust Dragon, Red Dragon Archfiend, Avenging Knight Parshath, Yugioh Guardian, Magical Android, Nitro Warrior, and Thought Ruler Archfiend. Other key cards would be Krebens and Psychic Commander as the two most popular tuners, Book of Eclipse, Charge of the Light Brigade, Emergency Teleport, Gladiator Beast War Chariot, and Needlebug Nest. It kicked off the era with a bang thanks to a plethora of synchro monsters to get your meta adventure started. Stardust could negate destruction, Yugioh could seal a destroyed monster, Thought Ruler could gain you life points, Red Dragon had high attack and blows through defense position monsters, and Colossal Fighter from the tins could recur a warrior monster upon its destruction. You had a lot to pick from in the early game, ranging from specific to generic synchros, such as you may not ever play Parshath, who needs a non-tuner light, versus the basic yet still playable Magical Android. Even still, the other cards in the set played an equally large role in shaping the meta. War Chariot is a basic archetypal effect negation for the defending top deck. Light Brigade is a much needed search for Lightsworns, an archetype who had recently shown a high promise, and Emergency Teleport could summon a low-level psychic monster from your hand or deck, which would typically involve a tuner monster for synchro play, and at the time was the best route to do so. Plus, the tuner Krebens was a dark attribute, and all work to create the new synchro and psychic infused tier 0 deck, TeleDAD, which I'll discuss soon. And this isn't even mentioning the plethora of other solid cards, Duelist Genesis included, rounding off the premier 5D set as a nothing but phenomenal powerhouse core set. October 21st would be the TCG release of the Zombie World Structure deck, which starred Red Eye's Zombie Dragon, a spin-off archetype of Red Eyes that continues on strong. One can't help but see this as Dragon Roars and Zombie Madness's love child, but this is a half-truth, as despite Zombie Dragon being the cover card, the namesake is in regards to the new field spell card, Zombie World. This card doesn't add or subtract stats, yet what it does is simple. All monsters on the field and graveyard become zombie-type monsters, and neither player can tribute summon monsters except for zombie type. This one card gives more viability to cards like Zombie Master and Book of Life, It stops monarchs and combos well with rivalry of warlords. Just be careful because the old field spell rule still applies where you can only have one field spell on the field at a time. November 3rd would see the second wave of collectible tins, this time featuring 2 new synchros, Black Rose Dragon and Turbo Warrior. Let's focus on Black Rose Dragon. This level 7 generic synchro, upon its synchro summon, destroys all cards on the field. Wow, that's a generic extra deck Judgment Dragon. Like Duelist Genesis, these tins feature the new core set, which we'll get to when it's officially released. Following would be the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Volume 2 promotional card, Thunder King Ryo. This 19k 4-star monster would be best known for its floodgate capabilities, seeing as while it's on the field, neither player can add cards from their deck to their hand besides drawing them. Not only that, but you can send Thunder King to the grave to negate a special summon. Not a bad card. November 18th would mark the final core set of 2008 and an impact set at that. The official release of Crossroads of Chaos. If you took a time machine back to this period, you'd know it created the first divide between the dawn of the 5Ds era and the emerging TeleDAD format. This would be easy considering Time Machine was in this set. Key cards include Black Rose Dragon, Revived King Hades, Doom Kaiser Dragon, Tempest Magician, Plague Spreader Zombie, the White Stone of Legend, Secret Village of the Spellcasters, Miracle Fertilizer, and Gozen Match. While card for card, it may not be as great as Duelist Genesis, the cards here are still strong, with the 2 most notable ones being Black Rose and Plague Spreader Zombie. I already mentioned Rose's abilities, so when it comes to our zombie friend, this is when things get spicy. It's a weak zombie tuner that can revive itself from the grave by returning 1 card from your hand to the top of the deck. After that, Plague is banished when it's removed from the field. Even if you're not playing zombies, Plague can be useful and easy to summon in just about any deck that requires his services for a quick synchro summon. It has synergy with Dark Grepher, synergy with Lightsworn, and of course, the zombie archetype. This card was used for mass synchros for possible OTKs and was not meant to be treated lightly. That same month would be a reprint set in Dark Legends that mainly featured 2002 cards and then some. Like, Relinquished hadn't received a reprint since 2004, or Solemn Judgment since 2006. It also had other promo cards like Green Baboon and Dark Bribe, which were much needed reprints. In addition to that, each promo pack contained a brand new card, Gores, the Emissary of Darkness. Let's talk about old Gorsey here. If you take damage from your opponent, you can special summon this high stat monster, assuming you control no cards. And then if the damage was from battle, you special a token with stats equal to the damage you took. If it's effect damage, then your opponent takes that damage too. While the term hand trap has existed for a while now and DD Crow saw high rep at the 2008 World Championships, this was a whole new beast as it was a monster that would summon to the field in an offensive swing, instead of previous hand traps going straight from the hand to the grave. Now, the order of which monster you attack with first was of utmost importance. The last release of 2008 to discuss is the Shonen Jump Anniversary Pack. To commemorate the 10th anniversary of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, counting in Japan, this booster pack contained reprints with art drawn by Yu-Gi-Oh! Creator Kazuki Takahashi, plus 1 new card based on his dog. My favorite is probably a tie between Summon Skull and Janjo. Which one is your favorite? During this format, now known as TeleDAD format, there are plenty of SJC events. The first and only pre-list event was at Indianapolis, where Glad still reigned supreme. However, Zombie was the hype deck going in thanks to the recent release of Mizuki in Premium Pack 2. The first post-list event was at Baltimore, and Glad still held power even with the first big synchro deck showing up here, TeleDAD, which is short for Teleport Dark Arm Dragon. Yes, the war between Glad and Dad started once again, as Duelist was seeing just how to adopt the new synchro summoning mechanic. After all, Glad was not touched by the list in any capacity, so why not keep playing them? We saw other fun decks here too, like Vision Gun Synchro, which is based off the Vision Gun Blue OCG deck, based off Plasma's name, Synchro Zombie using Giant Rat to float into a tuner or Green Baboon, and Synchro Dude, a DDT variant. A key takeaway from Baltimore is that Neospatian Grand Mole was seeing play as anti-synchro tech. It was at Tulsa where TeleDAD dominated top 16, proving that if Glad wanted to keep up with the new top tier meta, they would have to evolve or perish. What worked in Dad return format worked even better here thanks to the all new dark support in the synchro mechanic. It was evident that white was the new black. By SJC Charlotte, TeleDAD was not going anywhere, even with some rep from Lightsworn, Glad, and Synchro Dude, of which was mostly absorbed into the TeleDAD deck. The issue Glad was having was that it wasn't quite as consistent as what Emergency Teleport, Destiny Heroes, and the Dark Engines could provide. Duelists were trying everything to counter this rising tier 0 strategy, a deck in a tier above everything else. Marshmallow, Magic Cylinder, Magic Drain, Windstorm of Itaqua, and even Desynchro and Necrophase had some speculation at the time. Beforehand, the deck was mostly known as Teleport Dark Armed, but this event cemented TeleDAD as a bona fide deck. Duelists finally understood the potential Synchros gave. SJC Chicago had top 8 Twilight, a deck that was Lightsworns with Dark Monsters, which helped give the Rogue Lightsworn deck more opportunities to push forward. Once Crossroads of Chaos was released, Atlanta kicked off the second version of TeleDAD format in a post-Plague Spreader zombie era. Right away, Plague made a clear impact to the meta scene, with new decks trying to fit in like Zombie, Macrocosmos, and Counter Fairy. However, it equally, if not in a greater sense, boosted TeleDAD. At least Counter Fairy would try out Sky Scourge Invisible to negate spell cards and use Thunder King too. Macro would replace the Monarch engine with a Synchro engine, and all of these decks would adopt Black Rose Dragon too. But again, Jerry Wang's incarnation of TeleDAD was the dominant $1,000 plus deck with no compromise. Right after that, at Detroit, this would be the first post-Scores event and the final piece to the meta map. Black Rose saw more play here as the 3 top decks, TeleDAD, Lightsworn, and Zombie, continued their rampage. Hey, at least there was top 16 Gadget, second place TeleDAD DDT, and a rogue plant deck. Yeah, plants. A deck that was theorized for a while finally saw some tournament testing from Jerome McHale. McHale finally put something together using a control build around Titanial and Polynosis' negation capabilities. While it's not a perfect deck by any means, its functionality and range of options makes it a rather underrated deck. Weird to think it took this long for a dedicated plant deck. The turning results also show that Gores also makes a great addition to help slower decks deal with TeleDAD, and TeleDAD to use Gores to punish them. Now the war between Cookie Cutter and creative decks began. Come 2009, and San Francisco would debut some fun decks. Demise Town, Demise OTK mixed with Ancient Gears with Trihorn Dragon? I think I'm in love. The idea of the deck was to drop big monsters faster than TeleDAD could. Sky Blaster can work with ritual plays too. Yugioh Adem played Cosmo Queen at SJ Houston in 2007, but Trihorn was a style pick for Tomas Mijares. To end off the format in Houston, top 16 was absolutely swarmed with TeleDAD. A solved meta won the war over creative duelists by none other than Jerry Wang. Early 2009 would have some releases for the next format, like the Jump promotional card Gandora, the Dragon of Destruction, and Champion Pack Game 8, with some new and import cards like Gravity Behemoth, Mushroom Man, and a Royal Oppression reprint. Remember, it was only recently that Oppression had the rule change where it could be activated right away to negate a special summon. So once a duelist set up their powerful synchro board, they could flip royal oppression and just stop the opponent. Now RO and Synchros could be countered with cards like Phoenix Wing Windblast, and back row hate like Breaker and Heavy Storm would help too. Essentially, RO would punish poor deck building, like Mystic Mine for a contemporary example. Dandelion would come out as the February 2009 Shonen Jump subscription bonus, but it was not played in this format as the final event for competitive play was Houston on January 17th, and that being the cutoff point. TeleDAD format would officially end on March 1st, come a new list, leaving a lasting impact on the first 5Ds format. And what a format it was! Where Glad started off strong, they lost steam quickly as Lightsworn picked up whatever pieces it could grab. But TeleDAD was considered tier 0 for its time, and most likely the only reason we saw other decks was due to the sheer cost of the popular deck. At the very least, zombies were at their peak here, and the support given did give a reason to run lower tier strategies. It was an explosive start to the 5D's competitive scene with plenty of powerful extra deck monsters like Stardust Dragon and Yugioh Guardian before it received an errata. Tuners were viable too thanks to E-Telly, Plague Spreader, and other synchro support. And even cards like Gores and Black Rose Dragon would help rogue decks. If you knew how to, you could counter powerful cards thanks to Oppression, Grand Mole, and Windblast. You just had to survive the oppressive TeleDAD deck, which was intensely challenging for any deck to keep up with unless you were a top tier duelist. At the same time, any new power card that could help a rogue deck, it would help TeleDAD too. I can't stress it enough. This was Yu-Gi-Oh's first tier 0 format since 2004's Chaos format. Remember Chaos Emperor Dragon and Yata Garasu? If Upper Deck was to start this new era of Yu-Gi-Oh, this was certainly one way to do it. It has followed the former two 2008 formats in regards to being a single deck dominated domain. This one in particular took that sentiment to the extreme. Again, however, it did showcase just what Synchros could do to re-energize decks and form brand new ones and keep the game fresh and going forward for years to come. Tier 0 is Tier 0, and that's never good for the game's health. What we got is nothing short of a fascinating period and a wild way to get us the jump start onto the Starlight Road that is the 5D's era. What comes next is, well, I'll let Konami and Upper Deck fight over that one.